On behalf of myself and Siobhan Brady, it is my deep pleasure to introduce Dr. Terry Long as the recipient of the first NASC Award for Excellence in Supporting Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging in the Arabidopsis community. Dr. Long has achieved excellence in promoting diversity at all levels. At the K-12 level, where it is critical to increase participation of underrepresented members of society. She has worked with 3 different groups to promote participation in plant biology, including NC-MSEN, Catalyst, and 4-H Extension. At the undergraduate level, she is the NC State University Advisor for the Manners Program. At the graduate level, she is the co-PI for the NCSU NSF-funded Interdisciplinary Biochemistry Master's Program to increase diversity. She has also been an active participant in the ASPB Diversity and Inclusion Committee and the joint ASPB-NASC Changing Cultures and Climate Committee. But her most powerful contribution to the Arabidopsis community is in the NASC Inclusivity Cohort Scholars Program. This program was spurred by her experience at ICAR 2010 in Japan, where she was one of only a small number of BIPOC attendees, and she felt ill-equipped to successfully navigate the conference or connect with other BIPOC scientists. So she brought this experience back to Siobhan and myself, and this led us to co-create the NASC Inclusivity Scholars Cohort Program. This program, which has been generously funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation, it has been running since 2014, so we're in our 10th year, and it coordinates an inclusivity program for those from underrepresented groups in U.S. STEM. The goal of this program is to form a more cohesive and supportive cohort and to decrease the sense of isolation that underrepresented scholars often feel in STEM fields. Events include mentoring, research presentations, network, and support in career development and job searches. According to one student, in the cohort, we have become known to each other and we will remain friends and help each other along our career path. Without Terry, our Arabidopsis and plant biology communities would look much different. We are thrilled to present her with this award and recognize her for all she has done to advance diversity and inclusiveness within our Arabidopsis community. So Terry, come on up.
Thank you, Joanna, for that introduction. I didn't realize we were doing that. I appreciate it. I'd like to thank the community for this award. It is a huge pleasure to me to be recognized for this, but please know that that none of this work was done in isolation. I've had amazing colleagues, many of whom are sitting in this room to help with all of these initiatives, and I hope to continue to work with you all in these endeavors and for many years to come. And also, thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk a little bit about a topic of my choosing, which was, for me, being Black in plant biology, giving my perspective on that. I was told to talk a little bit about my science, just to put things in context. My research focuses on iron homeostasis in plants. And as many of you know, Arabidopsis as a dicot actually induces a strategy 1 response that leads to acidification of the rhizosphere, which then leads to reduction of ferric iron to ferrous iron by membrane localized iron reductases on the membrane of the epidermal cells of the root. Then ferrous iron is transported into the epidermis, and then iron is then transported from the epidermis to the vascular tissues and then moves from the root into the shoot, where it's then incorporated into key metabolic processes. But this is just a picture of the epidermis. And as we all know, Arabidopsis is a multicellular organ, and the root is a organism, and the root is a multicellular organ. And we're learning more and more about these processes. So we know that, for example, we're learning that there are key BHLHs that control the activity of the expression of FRO2 and IRT1, and we're now learning more and more about how IRT1 is controlled post-translationally. But as I said before, this is just a depiction of what's happening in a single epidermal cell. And like I said, Arabidopsis is a multicellular organism, and the root is a multicellular organ. And what I've been really interested in the last however many years is understanding how individual cell types respond to iron deficiency and understanding regulatory networks that happen at a cell type specific level. So many years ago when I was a postdoc in Philip Infy's lab, I worked with Jose to transcriptionally profile every major cell type within the Arabidopsis root. And this led to the identification of two key players in iron homeostasis, Brutus and Popeye. Since I started my own lab, we've we've learned more about the function of Brutus as an E3 ligase, and we've also learned more about the function of Popeye as a transcription factor that moves in between cells and that may have a specific function within the cortex. I've also characterized more recently epidermal specific responses as well as vascular specific responses and identifying new key players involved in vascular response to iron deficiency. And along the way, I've been able to do some really exciting work looking at iron and abiotic and biotic crosstalk, and looking at and developing new mathematical models that explain cell type specific and spatial temporal responses to iron deficiency in Arabidopsis roots. I developed an interest in plant sciences in a very young age because I grew up on a small farm in rural North Carolina. When I went to university, I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and I knew I wanted to study plants because of this love, and I walked into Jeff Dangle's lab, and I said, I'd like to work in your lab, and he and John McDowell took me under their wings and opened my eyes to the idea of working on plants as a career. Someone took the time to write an NIH-funded training award for undergraduates, Dr. Frierson, and that helped to fund our work. But it wasn't until I met Dr. Sladen Evans, who was a chemistry professor at UNC, that I began to see myself potentially as someone who could study science as a career. Dr. Sladen Evans passed away recently, so I never got a chance to tell him the influence he had on my life, but he was the only Black faculty that I saw my entire time in college, both undergraduate and graduate. But just that one person was enough to light a spark in me to show that maybe one day I could be where he is. From there, I went on to pursue a PhD at the University of Georgia with Dr. Sarah Covert. She was an amazing, strong advisor to again help me to see myself as a woman potentially running my own lab. From there, I went to Duke University, where I met an amazing cohort of friends and colleagues that are now my network of colleagues and collaborators that I work with to this day. Bill Walden was kind enough to recruit me to UIC for my first faculty position, and then Becky Boston and Wendy Boss, two amazing faculty at NC State, really advocated for me to come to NC State. And I wanted to show this slide so that people could understand the role. You never know the impact that you might have on someone. You know, just a kind word or just advocating for them when they're not in a room could change the trajectory of someone's life. Right now, I'm a faculty at NC State, North Carolina State University, and I've always had a small lab, but I've always had a very diverse lab. And I'm really hoping that I've been as wonderful of a mentor to the people in my lab as I have had. And I'm really proud of the fact that each of my cohorts I've had at least one African-American woman who's a PhD student and has gone on to continue in academia. But my fear is that, other underrepresented students may not be able to see themselves by not having access to other faculty who look like them, because the number of African American, Hispanic, American Indian, and Alaskan Native individuals, for example, who are professors, really is around 1% to 2% right now in the US. This dearth is particularly noticeable in plant sciences. And Thelma Manzima and Gustavo published a report a few years ago showing that in plant sciences, underrepresentation is more acute than in any other scientific field. I think some of the reasons for this is because students might ask, why is plant science relevant to me? Can I really make a viable career out of studying plants? And why don't more people look like me in this field? Agriculture and plant sciences may also be associated with agriculture, whereas is historically associated with the exploitation of seasonal workers, or also known as migrant workers, and enslaved people. But even after the end of slavery, after the Civil War, there are quite a few, for example, African Americans who actually owned farms. The number of African Americans who lost their farms is about 98% between the end of the Civil War and more recently. And even more recently, as early as 1999, the Pigford versus Glickman class action lawsuit, which was a lawsuit that was won by African American farmers, was a class action lawsuit brought against the USDA for racial discrimination against African American farmers. So again, these are some of the reasons why you don't see as many African Americans in this room, is potentially because a lot of them don't necessarily grow up on farms, right? So that closeness to the land they may not have. But it's not all gloom and doom. There are organizations that are working really hard to increase the number of underrepresented people who are going into plant sciences. ASPB, for example, has a committed Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, which I've served on, and they work really hard to have travel awards for students from all groups come to and attend ASPB. ASPB also has Roots and Shoots, as well as ASPB Forward, as well as an ongoing call for papers that address diversity in plant sciences. Of course, near and dear to us is the work of NASC and ICAR, and I just want to highlight Joanna Friesner, because I don't know if you all know, but Joanna is extremely passionate about diversity in plant sciences, and she has worked really hard over the last few years to do things, for example, like including into the ART 21 RCN proposal funding to support cohorts of students that lead to the ISP program that she described here. In addition, you may not know, in addition to the ISS program, we also have the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leadership Committee, which works very hard to ensure that we are supporting the ISP program. The ISP program has supported, I think as of last year, 110 scholars. Right now, it's under the direction and leadership of Chris Arguessa and Mentawab Ayalou, and it's an amazing program that doesn't just bring in students to the conference, but it helps to build networks like Joanna was mentioning earlier. A few years ago, we brought together both NASC and ASPB to create Changing Cultures and Climates, and I'll talk a little bit later about Front and Center. We also developed Adventitious Roots, as well as the Anti-Racism Toolkit. So Adventitious Roots is now a Slack channel that helps to create a safe space for underrepresented plant biologists. And the Anti-Racism Toolkit provides literature, and is really a passion of Siobhan Braybrook. And so many people in this audience are excited about this topic, but there are probably a ton of people who are like, oh, I'm so tired of hearing about this. And so the next few slides, I just want to kind of emphasize why looking at diversity in plant sciences is so important. By the year 2060, there will no longer be a majority population, right? Even right now, and because we are moving into no longer having a majority white population, there will no longer be a majority population at all. It's really important, even according to the National Academy of Sciences, that the United States actually really recruit and retrain a diverse student body that reflects the diversity of our society as a whole. So we have to do this in order for us to maintain our to be globally competitive. If that doesn't convince you, a number of studies have shown that diverse groups are more productive and innovative, right? And this is because diverse groups focus on more facts than biases. And if that doesn't convince you, perhaps you've heard of the diversity innovation paradox in science. And so this was a study that came out a few years ago from a group in Stanford that really looked at the near complete population of US doctorate recipients from 1977 to 2015. And what they found was that the more students are underrepresented genders or races in their discipline, the more likely they are to introduce novel conceptual linkages. And if you're interested in the paper, it's really fascinating. They also found that demographically underrepresented students innovate at higher levels than majority students, but their novel contributions are discounted and less likely to earn them academic positions. The discounting of minorities' innovations may partly explain their underrepresentation in influential positions of academia. I'll let that sit for a second. Because of these issues, there needs to be an increased support for students from underrepresented groups. And there are groups that have developed recently to address these issues. For example, SACNAS. Raise your hand if you're familiar with SACNAS. Okay, very good. So SACNAS is the Society for Advancing Chicanas, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science. This is funded around in the 1970s, and this is an amazing program. It has about 10,000 members right now, and this particular program is really important because it uniquely represents the fastest growing demographic in the United States. And it is well funded by a variety of different companies who recognize that changing demographic. Another group that focuses on STEM, increasing diversity in STEM, is OSTEM, Out in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. This came out of a meeting that was sponsored by IBM in 2005, and it really focuses on supporting students from the LGBTQ+ community. And right now, it has about 100 chapters across the US and across the UK. Narrowing down, MANARS is an affinity organization that supports underrepresented minorities who are interested in natural resources and related sciences. So these are students who are interested, in agriculture, natural resources, and related sciences. And so this started in the 1980s and mainly consists of African American and some Hispanic students. And this is a really important organization. There are thousands of members that are a part of MANARS right now. And again, this is well funded by a variety of different companies because they also recognize the changes in US demographics. Narrowing down even further, we have the National Society of Engineers, which consists of about 24,000 active members, which supports, of course, African American engineers. We even have the American Indian Science and Engineering Society that focuses on supporting American Indians. Right now, they have about 4,000 members, and they are growing. And even we have the National Society of Black Physicists. So as I'm saying, we're getting narrower and narrower. And so one question that I want to ask you is there a need for a National Society for Black, Latin, and Indigenous scientists to support and expand the burgeoning body of minoritized plant scientists? Or can we work with an established society, such as this organization here, or ASPB, to truly make the field more diverse and inclusive? There are groups that are already starting to do this. So for example, Black Botanist Week, started by Tanisha Williams, was first organized in 2020 to promote, encourage, and create a safe space for BIPOC who are interested in plant sciences. Front and Center, which was recently funded by Root and Shoot, is a program to increase visibility and community for Black, Indigenous, and Latin plant sciences. Basically, it's a program that basically shows you the faces of students so you can understand the diversity of people who are interested in plant science. I think the UK might even be ahead of the game, right? And the UK has just recently started Black in Plant Science. This is a program that was recently funded, about 65,000 euro to support and cultivate and celebrate Black people in science. So Stephen Spool and Nicola Patron and Jocelyn Benitez Alfonso, some of our good friends, are the leaders of this initiative. And so I've given you hopefully some seed, some food for thought. And this is not what I normally talk about, but I figured if I was getting a award for this, I might as well take advantage of this captive audience. I'll thank you, but I want you to see the faces of some of the new kind of up-and-coming graduate students and postdocs and young assistant professors. This is a figure that Kevin Cox showed recently in a blog that celebrates Black History Month for ASPB. And I hope that this number continues to expand, and I hope that 20 years from now, I'll see these folks sitting in the audience as well-established faculty. And so with that, I'll thank you.